It's no small secret that some of my favorite characters tend to be from the darker, more gritty side of their respective universes. No, not goofy wannabe dark edgelords like Son of Satan, Azrael, 90s Fate, or Bloodwind. Ugh. But instead more grounded characters with mysticism or gothic tones, characters like Zatanna, Death, Spectre, Hellboy, Morpheus, Constantine, Phantom Stranger, or Swamp Thing. In the Marvel Universe, there's always been a clear, contrasting distinction between the mystical Doctor Strange stories, Asgardian books, and the gritty streets of New York that the Defenders patrol. However, in DC, it all kind of blends together and overlaps. It's not uncommon for someone like Wonder Woman, Flash, or Nightwing to dip their nose into something they don't understand and need a mystic-type hero for help. In fact, this is one of the reasons that I've always considered myself more of a DC guy than a Marvel fan, specifically because of how cool the darker side of the DC universe is. Magic in the Marvel universe is either rooted in Norse space opera or trippy-dippy, pseudo-Tibetan-esque mysticism. Magic in the Marvel universe tends to have pretty defined rules, but in the DC universe, it's more Lovecraftian. It's twisted, dark, unpredictable, and very temperamental. Sure, there are guys like Superman and the Flash that regularly have grandstanding adventures and save the world in the broad daylight, but for me, it's always been the nocturnal, mysterious characters of the DC universe, like Batman, Etrigan, and Constantine, who really draw me in. The dark mystic side of DC is very different than anything that Marvel has to offer. It's a lot more gothic and horror-based, and that's something I've loved since I was a teen. And it's for that very reason that my favorite DC character has always been Boston Brand, the Deadman. Boston Brand had a rough childhood and abusive parents. He loved Peter Pan and dreamed that one day he would be taken away to Neverland, but unfortunately, that day never came, and Boston ended up running away from his abusive family after a fight, and then joined the circus. And in time, became a world-renowned acrobat and the circus's headlining act. He was adored and loved by many, who watched his death-defying aerial acrobatics. However, he was also an arrogant, selfish jerk who would step on others in a heartbeat if it meant furthering his own career. Boston went by the name Deadman on account of his daredevil acrobatic stunts, which were always performed with no net. In every version of his origin, Deadman dies while on the high wire. Sometimes he was shot and sometimes the line was cut, but in every iteration of the story, the reader is reminded if Boston had performed with a net, then it would have saved his life. So, if not for his own hubris, his pride, and his inflated ego, Boston could have survived that incident and avoided a perpetual purgatory in the land of the living. Boston was never fortunate enough to find his way to the afterlife, however. Instead, the goddess Rama Kushna condemned him to the life of an undead wandering spirit due to his self-centered actions in life. So now in the afterlife as an undead warrior, Deadman is tasked with balancing the scales once again by possessing less than capable souls. But how can he be expected to be held responsible for fixing the lives of the broken when Boston can't even fix himself? Regardless, Boston Brand won't be seeing the pearly gates until he can rebalance those scales.
A spirit whose existence is not its own, like myself. Interesting.
Yeah, that.
Deadman stories tend to be melancholy, dreary, and somewhat hopeless at times. But despite all the doom and gloom, Boston has more than enough personality to make it very interesting. The gothic aesthetic provides a very unique backdrop for Deadman's corner of the DC universe. We usually don't see art like this or writing like this unless it's a Vertigo book like Sandman or Constantine, or a one-off Batman book like Arkham Asylum. I think that one of the things that makes Deadman most appealing to me is the way he straddles the line between superhero and superstition. With his books being dark and gothic without being edgy and hardcore, and his books also being superhero-esque at the same time, but with serious themes, dark aesthetics, and grim consequences, as opposed to bright poppy colors, consequenceless actions, and the day being saved every time all the time. What this translates to is a trippy-dippy gothic ghost superhero. Boston's unique power set is another thing that sets him apart. You see, Boston is literally a ghost. If he strolled into the Hall of Justice, no one would notice him. Unless they had some kind of mystical ability to see ghosts. Which, to be fair, there are quite a few mystical characters in the DC universe who can actually see Boston. His main powers include walking through walls, flying, and, oh yeah, possessing the bodies of the living. So if Deadman has a message of importance to convey to the League, he'll have to temporarily borrow one of their bodies to do it.
A burger place in Metropolis that has the best fries on the East Coast. And the milkshakes are so thick, I need your help.
That's pretty thick.
Yeah, okay. You have to eat them with a spoon. What am I doing in Africa?
One of my favorite things about Deadman comics is the perspective that Deadman offers. I really love seeing the DC universe through the eyes of Boston Brand. I love seeing a superhero that looks less like Superman or The Incredibles and looks more like he just walked out of an Anne Rice novel or a Tim Burton movie. Not just that, but Deadman has an entirely unique attitude when compared to the other superheroes, and even other mystic heroes. He's cynical, sarcastic, and to be honest, sometimes he's just a Debbie Downer. And at times he's even borderline nihilistic. But let's be honest, how would you feel if you found yourself in an endless purgatory between life and death? He's not witty and sarcastic like Deadpool, and he's not grim and serious like Batman. He's this bizarre mix of both, and also with a little Eeyore thrown in there.
End of the road. Nothing to do. And no hope of things getting better.
Deadman is someone who's reached rock bottom, true rock bottom, with absolutely nowhere to go but up, but he has no idea how to get there or where to even begin. Deadman is truly and utterly hopeless. He's a character who embodies the most broken parts of our hearts, someone who shows pain, desperation, and depression in ways that heroes like Wonder Woman, Flash, or Captain America would never be able to. But despite all of that, even with the odds stacked against him, Boston Brand still has a desire in his heart to aid his fellow man and to save innocents from harm, and make an honest attempt to do the right thing, even if he doesn't always know what that might be, and sometimes if what he thinks the right thing is may actually be the opposite. So many Deadman books have such amazingly dark, grim, gothic aesthetics. It's so beautiful, and maybe I'm partial, but I feel like you just don't see art like this anywhere anymore. I think books like Deadman and Sandman always shine so brightly when compared to other DC books because the very same world tends to look a lot different through these guys' perspectives. Seeing things from the perspectives of Morpheus, Deadman, Constantine, Etrigan, or Death remind us that there are larger threats than Lex Luthor and his giant death robots, and that there are some extra-dimensional threats so ancient, so powerful, and so unwieldy that not even Superman, Wonder Woman, or the entire Justice League would stand a chance to them.
That man's heard of me? Sweet. Tell him I'm a fan of his too. But, you know, be cool about it.
Yeah, that's him.
Ask him if he caught one of my shows.
Sorry, Boston, but life is for the living.
Originally, I planned for this to be a whole section on the best Deadman comic runs, but I ended up writing way too much, so I decided to split that into a different video for later, which should be up by, hopefully, the end of the month. But for now though, instead, I'm just going to talk about the artwork and the gothic aesthetics that are applied to several of my favorite Deadman comic books. Deadman books tend to have some of the most unique artwork in DC Comics, particularly as he's drawn by Kelly Jones. Kelly Jones breathes such beautifully horrific and eerie unlife into the pages of his Deadman books. The scenery is so moody and eerie. You feel like there's something hidden behind every corner, like something could pop out at you at any moment. Things are creepy and suspenseful just looking at them. I've read books that make me tense up and feel fear. I've watched many movies and TV shows that have managed to creep me out. But Kelly Jones is the only comic book artist that makes me feel that same on-edge, creeped out feeling as they do. Jones' character designs for humans, monsters, and ghosts are always so beautiful. Deadman specifically. Deadman looks like he just crawled out of a Jonan Vasquez cartoon or a Guillermo del Toro movie. His look is always somewhere between a living skeleton and a corpse, an interpretation of the character's design that I truly love. To be honest, I don't like it when Deadman's drawn as a typical muscular superhero. But when he's drawn like this instead, he feels like so much more than just a superhero Spectre. We can see the torment of his undying existence just by looking at him. Similar to his appearance in the Kelly Jones books, in Mark Waid's Kingdom Come, Alex Ross draws Deadman as just a skeleton in a trapeze artist uniform. I really love this interpretation, but my only problem is that without a face, it's kind of hard to read Deadman's emotions. But nonetheless, it's a unique and aesthetically appealing design that really suits the character well, and I still love anyway. To be honest, I just love every design of this character. I think he's awesome. For almost 20 years after the Kelly Jones Deadman books, we were left with the same tired house art style for nearly every Deadman appearance. It wasn't until 2016's Deadman, Mansion of Forbidden Love, that we finally received a book with the proper gothic aesthetics befitting of Boston brand. Without delving too much into the plot of the book, Deadman finds himself pulled to a haunted mansion where a psychic and her writer boyfriend live. Deadman and the psychic have to solve the mystery of who murdered the ghost woman and exactly what dark enchantment is possessing the house. The house is so beautiful, and Deadman is rendered so beautifully as well in this comic. I love the scenery and all the small little details in the artwork of the house. The characters are just drawn so well. This book is really worth reading just for the art alone. But the writing is pretty phenomenal too. I love this look for a Deadman book, and I'd love to see more like it. This is probably one of the best Deadman books to come out in the last 10 years, and I really think you should check it out.
You killed my teacher, my friend.
You'll have to be more specific, lady. I've killed a lot of people.
The old monk.
What are you waiting for? You want revenge? Take it.
No, that's not what he would have wanted. Next time, ask permission.
There have been 2 times that it was announced that Deadman would get his own TV show. One time for TNT in the early 2000s, and once again in 2011 for the CW. And that one was supposed to have been headed by the Supernatural creator. Honestly, the latter of those 2 is something that I would have loved to have seen. I'm sure Deadman could totally coexist with Constantine in CW's Arrowverse if that ever happened. But unfortunately, we've spent 7 years with no news, so I imagine any hopes of ever seeing that show are probably as good as dead. Probably about as dead as Boston. But that being said, I'd kill to see a Deadman episode of Legends of Tomorrow, Flash, Arrow, or Supergirl. I love the campy Silver Age tones of those universes, and watching episodes of those shows really feels like watching a Saturday morning cartoon to me. A Deadman show set in that universe with the same tone as iZombie, Pushing Up Daisies, or Dead Like Me would just be perfect in my opinion. I'd love it so much. It would be the best. But regardless, Deadman has had a lot of cool appearances in the animated shows and animated films, including my first encounter with him in Justice League Unlimited, which is a really great story that you should check out if you get a chance. It's also pretty sad, to be honest, in that way that Deadman does what he has to do to save the day, but still ends up betraying the trust and confidence of one of his closest allies in doing so. Deadman also appears in a couple of episodes of Batman the Brave and the Bold, the most notable being an episode called Dawn of the Deadman. Also, Cartoon Network used to have a really cool block of DC content on Saturday mornings called DC Nation, which featured cartoon shorts of different DC characters alongside shows like Beware the Batman, Young Justice, Teen Titans Go, and Green Lantern the Animated Series. Deadman actually had his own series of shorts in that block, made by the creator of Chowder, C.H. Greenblatt. These 3 shorts are absolutely wonderful. They're so cute, while maintaining that grim aesthetic that Deadman's known for. I love the contrasting colors between the ghost world and the real world. Deadman's pet Raven is really cute too, and I actually have a plush of the Deadman and Raven that were featured in the show, and I actually use it to turn my closet light on and off. This cartoon is really adorable, and I love it. I really wish there was more of it, and it's only like 6 minutes long if you want to check it out. It's definitely worth your time. Most recently, Deadman has appeared in Justice League Dark, a loose adaptation of the comic of the same name. The film has a stellar cast of supernatural superheroes, and some of my all-time favorite DC characters are in the film, including but not limited to Swamp Thing, Felix Faust, Zatanna, Etrigan, Constantine, and even characters like Merlin show up, and some awesome comic book runs like Demon Knights get mentioned too. One of the things this movie does really well is establish the magic continuity and the interconnectedness of that side of the DC universe. One of my favorite parts of the film was when Deadman was jumping body to body in the hospital to save innocents from harm. Plus, Deadman has some really funny lines in this flick.
Oh, the shit's really hit the fan.
But on that note, I don't particularly care for Deadman's voice actor. His accent sounds so fake and forced, but despite that, I still feel like they nailed the characterization here. Out of the few complaints I have about the movie, I think one of the main ones is the presence of Batman. He's just kind of there and only really exists to facilitate connections between the characters and supply us with expositional information. I think all the Justice League cameos are pretty unnecessary and unwarranted and only make the movie feel unnecessarily bloated. But let's be honest, we all know the real reason Batman's there. Because WB knows anything with Batman on the cover will sell more. So Bruce is here being absolutely out of his depth and a complete liability of the team and completely and utterly useless most of the film. I like Batman a lot, but I don't think he has any place here outside of being a marketing gimmick. Before we move away from film and TV, I'd also like to mention this. Guillermo del Toro, the director of one of my all-time favorite films, The Shape of Water, and many other great films like Pan's Labyrinth and Hellboy, has expressed interest in the character many times. And I can't think of a better director to bring this character to life. There's no one I'd rather see tackle this character, and in fact, Mr. Del Toro was attached to a Justice League Dark movie that got shelved, and Deadman was supposed to be a part of that cast. Deadman has really been growing in popularity the last few years, and I'd love to see him thrust into the forefront by such a creative, capable, and captivating creator like Mr. Del Toro. After all, The Shape of Water is basically a twist on Creature of the Black Lagoon, and Del Toro does love to tell gothic love stories about monsters and the supernatural, so I can only imagine the level of depth and visual spectacle he would bring to the character. I can't imagine a single person more qualified and perfect to write Deadman than Guillermo del Toro. I guess the final point I'd like to get across is that whenever these stories tend to really focus on Boston Brand as an individual, his plight, and his character, and he isn't relegated to being Batman's mystical sidekick or a member of whatever new Justice League Dark relaunch came out this week, then I think the stories always end up a lot better. The life of Deadman is the life of an outsider looking in, ever observant and always longing. And that gets lost when Deadman is relegated to being the supernatural sidekick or comic relief of an overcrowded teen book like JLD. And a lot of the time in those stories, he comes off feeling cliche or lacking development, which is a real shame considering how great his story arc is. I love it when the stories really focus on who Deadman is, what that means, his flaws, his hubris, his pride, why he is who he is, how he got where he is, how he can grow, how he can change, what he has left to learn, how he can evolve, etc., etc. It's stories like those that make Deadman amazing. When Deadman is done right, it always ends up so great. I think that means conveying a sense of desperation, hopelessness, and of darkness and depression. Because ultimately, things are grim in the world of Deadman. He can go anywhere, do anything, be anyone, but he's always trapped on the outside looking in. Exploring Deadman means exploring our own mortality and our relationships with the people in the world around us. To me, the stories are about teaching us to overcome our shortcomings so that we can be better. Not just for the world around us, but for ourselves as well. I think the lesson that Ramakrishna wants Deadman to learn is that even if things are hopeless, even in a state of utter depression and despair with nowhere left to go, we can still be the glimmer of light that shines in the dark, no matter how dark it may get.